Good morning, guys. Today we are going to be canning up some mushrooms using our pressure canner. I used the last of my mushrooms up the other day, so it's time to stock up some more. You will need a pressure canner and a large stock pot to boil water in, some white vinegar, the star of our show, some mushrooms. I'm using white mushrooms today because they were on sale, and in total I'm using about 5 pounds. This was enough to make a full canner load of half pints for me. Equipment-wise, you will need a chopping board, some half pints or pint glasses depending on how much you'd like to can, a canning tongs, canning funnel, a sharp knife, and optionally, some canning salt. You don't have to add this, but if you do, make sure you use canning and pickling salt. The first thing I always do is make sure to fill up anything that I need to get water boiling. This includes my pressure canner, so follow your pressure canner instructions as to how much you need to fill. Mine says about 2 inches on the bottom for pressure canning, and I always add a splash of vinegar to help keep any sediment from getting onto my glass jars. I also get a large stock pot of water boiling. We'll use this later to cook our mushrooms in. Both pots go on the stove to start warming up. It could take quite a while sometimes for hot water to come to a boil, so I like to get this process started early on so everything's ready to go when I'm ready to use it. This is also a great opportunity to get your jars warmed up. I go ahead and place mine straight into the pressure canner while the water is still fairly cool. This keeps them from shattering later on when you fill them with the hot liquid and or food. Now that everything is prepped and warming up on the stove, we can start processing our mushrooms. These are just regular white button mushrooms I picked up from the store. Per the National Center for Home Food Preservation's website, any domestic mushroom can be pressure canned, but they do recommend against any wild mushrooms. I'm not sure if this is because they want to avoid any potential issues with people foraging mushrooms, preserving them and then accidentally poisoning themselves, or if wild mushrooms just have so many more extra contaminants compared to domestic ones that they can't guarantee the safety even with the pressure canning. The first thing we need to do is to trim up all of our stems and get rid of any bruised areas. I also ended up with these huge button mushrooms, which I have never seen them this large before, so I was super impressed. But I just go through and trim up all of the stems. I leave some of the stem if they're really long, but for the most part, I just get rid of a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch. I have a sink of cold water here that I am placing them into. They're going to soak in this cold water for 10 minutes. I also kind of go through and rub off any dirt that I can see on the outside and just agitate them gently to try and get all of the dirt and contaminants out. Once they have been thoroughly washed, I go ahead and drain the sink and I give them a final rinse with my sprayer to get the last little bit of dirt off. Back to the chopping block we go. I'm doing slices here today. I like to use my mushrooms in sauces a lot to make like a cream sauce with mushrooms or add it into soups, but you can can them whole if they are small. If they're larger, you can cut them into chunks. So pick whatever would work best for you. So while I am getting these all sliced up, let's talk a little bit about water bath canning versus pressure canning. With water bath canning, you don't require any special equipment. You just need a large stock pot that is big enough that when your jars are inside, that the water can be 1 inch over the top of the jars. Pressure canning requires a special pressure canner that is capable of creating a seal and pressure inside so that your food heats up much hotter than the temperature of boiling water. The main difference between foods that can be water bath canned and ones that need to be pressure canned is the acidity of the food. So mushrooms are not very acidic on their own, so they have to be pressure canned. But things like jams and jellies, tomato sauces, and things that are tomato base can mostly be water bath canned if you follow the directions correctly. And the reason that we go through so much extra effort when it comes to low acid foods is due to trying to prevent the botulism bacteria from having a good place to grow. It does not like high pHs, or the extreme pHs. So high acid foods are an environment that they do not like to grow in, but they would be very happy to grow in our mushrooms if we didn't take the added step of heating it up very hot. So regular boiling water will kill botulism, but it does not kill their spores. So we have to try and reduce the risk as much as possible by increasing the temperature over boiling water using the pressure canner. Now that my mushrooms are all sliced up, I am going to put them in this pot, or try to. I ended up with several on the floor, but I am going to put them in here and let them boil for 5 minutes. While the mushrooms are boiling away, I'm going to go ahead and remove all of these glass jars out of my canner and get them onto a cloth covered cutting board ready to go. So using a canning funnel, I am going to spoon my mushrooms into the jars. I'm using a slotted spoon. You do not want to use the water from the boiling pot of water you have on the stove. We will be covering them with fresh water here in a second. I'm leaving about 1 inch of head space. That is the distance between the top lip of the jar and where the food sits. And we're going to use fresh boiling water to fill up, once again leaving that 1 inch of headspace. Something I did not get a clip of was using a long slender chopstick to remove any bubbles from my jars, or tapping them gently on the board to remove any air that may be trapped. Now I'm using some white vinegar on a clean paper towel to wipe the rims. You want to make sure that your rims are very clean so that when you put your lids on and into the pressure canner, that it will make a nice tight seal, that nothing will get in the way of that. And just a word of warning, these jars are hot and the liquid inside of them is very hot. I'm one of those people who has been dealing with hot dishwater and hot dishes for most of my life, so I have a fairly high tolerance on the tips of my fingers. So just be very careful, don't burn yourself. Lastly, we are going to get a fresh lid and center it onto the jar and place the ring bend on and tighten to fingertip tight. And they are ready to go into the pressure canner. Follow whatever instructions came with your pressure canner. It will usually tell you to check a couple things before you start pressure canning. Mine is all ready to go, so I am going to just go ahead and put my lid on and get it sealed up. And then we will be processing at 11 pounds of pressure for 45 minutes. My pressure canner has returned to regular pressure, and I can now lift off the lid. Be careful, usually face the lid away from you so you don't get a face full of steam. And I'm going to remove these jars and set them on my cloth covered chopping board and let them cool and seal. As you can see, these guys were a little bit stuck in there. Either they shifted, but it's usually kind of a tight little pack for these half pints. So I just used a spoon to wiggle one out so that I could get all of them out easily. So that's it, guys. We have canned up some mushrooms. I will go ahead and leave these on the counter overnight and check for a good seal tomorrow morning by pressing on the center of the cap. If they don't pop back and forth, then you have a good seal. These will go down into a cool, dry place. That is my storage cupboard for these sorts of things, and I will enjoy them for up to a year. Thanks, guys, for watching. I'll see you guys next time.